Hello, in this week's Footy Talk, I'm going to talk about Doce Grandes, or the Big 12. So these are the most popular and successful teams in the Brazilian league. I'm going to give you some incredible reasons how the clubs got their nicknames and also some information about how they were founded. Okay, let's start in Rio de Janeiro, which is not the capital city, and the club Fluminense. Their nickname is Pó de Arroz, which in English translates to rice powder or face powder. And there are a couple of explanations for this nickname. One of them is that Fluminense, which is like an aristocratic, a rich man's football club, when visiting teams came to their stadium and they had black players, their fans would throw face powder or rice powder onto the pitch, so they got the nickname of Pó de Arroz, face powder. Flamengo are probably the most supported team in Brazil, and their nickname, well, they have many nicknames, but one of their nicknames is Urubu, which means vulture or the vultures. And this is because the Fluminense aristocrats gave them this nickname. A vulture is a black bird that flies over the shanty towns or the favelas in Rio. So the Fluminense fans noticed that a lot of the Flamengo fans were black, so they gave them the nickname of Urubu, the vultures. Flamengo are also known as Mengão, which is just because of their name, Flamengo, Meng, and Ao is a suffix in Portuguese and it means big. In 1963, in a Flamengo versus Fluminense match at the Maracanã, there were over 190,000 people in the stadium. Botafogo has the nickname Fogão, which again, Ao is the suffix meaning big, and this just comes from the name. Botafogo, Fogão. Botafogo translates in English as Spitfire or Firemaker. And this comes from a famous warship. One of the Portuguese crew from that warship went to live in Rio and actually fought for Portugal. And so Portugal gave him some land in Rio, and that area was known as Botafogo. The club, like many clubs in Brazil, was originally a rowing club, and the two rowing clubs merged together to form one club. And so their nickname is also Estrela Solitária, which means Lone Star. Botafogo have actually had the most players who have represented Brazil. Clarence Seedorf played for them recently. Vasco da Gama are named after the Portuguese explorer. And this is because, again, the club was originally a rowing club. They have lots of nicknames. One of them is Admirales, and this is because Vasco da Gama's nickname was Admiral of the Indian Seas. And also, as you can see on the badge, there is a Maltese cross. So their nickname is also Cruz Maltino. The club actually stood up to racism in the 1920s because the league did not allow them to play black players, so they refused to play, and eventually they won this fight and were reinstated into the league. Okay, in the other major city in Brazil, we have 4 other major teams. Probably the second most popular team in Brazil is Corinthians. And Corinthians is a word associated with football in England too. And the name Corinthians actually comes from the successful English amateur football team that toured around the world and went to Brazil. They liked that team and they took the name from that team. As you can see on the badge, it was originally a rowing club. Its nickname is the People's Club because of its links to social and political thinking, or sometimes they are commonly referred to as Timão. Ao, that suffix meaning big, team, so big team. The English Corinthians are actually still going, and they are an amateur team, so they play in non-league football in England. And I think recently they were asked by the Brazilian Corinthians to play in an anniversary football match. Palmeiras now, and they have an interesting history because their former name was Palestra Italia. And they had to change their name because after the Second World War, the Brazilian government said nobody can have the name of an Axis power in the name of their club. So this meant countries like Italy and Germany had to be removed from the names of the clubs. The club was founded by Italian immigrants, and they play in a green kit So their nickname is Verdão. Au meaning big, verde meaning green, so the Big Greens. Also, they have the nickname Porco, which means pigs. And this is because porco was a negative word about Italian immigrants. But actually the club have embraced this word, and now porco or pig is their mascot. And I think Palmeiras have won the most Brazilian championships. I think they have won 10. Sao Paulo are known as tricolor, and this is because of their kit or their jersey. They play in white, which represents Europeans, red, which represents Native Americans, and black, which represents Africans. On their badge there are 2 gold stars, and these represent the Olympic gold medals from a triple jumper about 50 years ago. Also on their badge there are 3 red stars, and these represent the Intercontinental or the Club World Cup championships that they have won. One was against Liverpool in 2005. Sao Paulo recently had an amazing goalkeeper who scored 132 goals in his career. That's more than Steven Gerrard. Just outside Sao Paulo on the coast is a team called Santos. This is one of the most famous teams in Europe because Pelé played for them. Pelé actually won 3 World Cups while he was a Santos player, and he won 26 trophies playing for them. They play in a white kit, and Santos's nickname was actually given to them by rival fans. So when Santos played in the city of Sao Paulo, they would be teased with shouts of fishmongers or fish because they were from the coast. And eventually they embraced this nickname, and now they are known as Peixe or fish. In Belo Horizonte, which is north of Rio, there are 2 teams, one of which are Atlético Mineiro. Their nickname is Galo, which means rooster, and they were given this nickname by a famous cartoonist at that time who decided the nicknames for all the teams in the Belo Horizonte area. They have a mascot, which is a rooster. Ronaldinho played for them near the end of his career. The other big team in Belo Horizonte is Cruzeiro, and their nickname is Raposa, or fox in English. And this comes from the cartoonist again. And Cruzeiro comes from the famous constellation Cruzeiro do Sul, which in English means the Southern Cross. You can see this constellation on the Brazilian flag, also on the Australian flag. It was used a lot in the Southern Hemisphere for exploring and navigation. Grêmio, whose founding members were mainly part of the German community, and they play in blue, black and white, so their nickname is the Immortal Tricolor. However, their first kit was a different colour, and it was hoops, and originally inspired by Exeter City. The big rivals of Grêmio in Porto Alegre are Internacional. So this team was originally founded by Italian immigrants because most of the other teams in the area were German. They play in red, and their fans or nickname is Colorados, which means the Reds. Okay, that's it. Doce Grandes, the Big 12, so the 12 most popular and successful teams in Brazil. I hope you got some nice information about these teams. Please like or comment below. See you in the next video.